Welcome to the Peak of Geek, where we've hit the top but with no plans to stop. You know, I love to laugh.
I love to laugh loud and long and clear.
And maybe it's because I've grown jaded and humorless over the years, but very few things actually make me laugh out loud. Of course, comedy, like most things, is very subjective, but there's one movie that is guaranteed to make me laugh every single time. And it's based on a board game of all things. This is Clue. Somehow, during the brainstorming meeting that eventually led to this movie, everyone bravely decided not to take the easy way out and make the Monopoly movie. And you know what? I respect that. Obviously, it would be a heist movie where a group of frenemies decide to put their differences and checkered past behind them for one last score. And each member of the group is represented by each game piece like Dr. Thimble, Mr. Boot, and Lady Top Hat with her Scottish Hound, among others. There's no question that the wealthy but mostly evil banker they're trying to steal from is the Monopoly Man. He keeps all his cash in his community chest, and at some point during the heist, the team has to steal one of those railroad trains to make their epic slow-motion getaway filled with tons of explosions. Wait, why isn't this a movie? Hey Netflix, give me a call. I've also got a comedically violent idea that would perfectly adapt Hungry Hungry Hippos. Anyway, back to Clue. Growing up, I was actually more of a 13 Dead End Drive fan. And I don't mean the updated version 1313 Dead End Drive, where everyone looks like they either have issues with their spine, or they've escaped from a creepy claymation film probably directed by Henry Selick and produced by Tim Burton. The original version looked reasonably normal, and it was so much fun to set up the traps and watch them knock off your friends as you all compete for Aunt Agatha's fortune. If you're a bit lost, 13 Dead End Drive is sort of like Mousetrap and Clue, but, you know, with a bit more murder. But just like Mousetrap, there are a lot of moving parts to the traps that were a bit too easy to break. And just like Mousetrap, the true excitement was lining up your friends in the traps, not running around the board collecting cheese or evidence or whatever. The mansion layout in 13 Dead End Drive was also like interacting with a playset. I loved all the little details that went towards setting up the mood. Oh, wait, sorry, Clue! Or Cluedo, as it was originally called in the UK, as a reference to Ludo, a British version of the Indian game Pachisi, which was never brought over to North America until Hasbro created its own inspired versions like Aggravation, Sorry, Trouble, and Parcheesi, with an R and two E's instead of an I. Since we had no idea what Ludo was back in 1949, this new detective board game was shortened to Clue for its Western release. Clue was a board game I first discovered tucked away in a small cupboard at my grandmother's house. I remember being fascinated by the board that depicted a bird's eye view of an old mansion, but was quickly turned off by the complicated rules that asked you to put on your detective hat and physically write down clues. To a young me, that sounded like homework, not a game that's supposed to be fun. But in actuality, Clue is quite simple to understand and still fun to play with a group of friends today. Have everyone pick a player token, shuffle out a few cards, then randomly choose a suspect, weapon, and room card. Once you start exploring rooms and suggesting who might have done it, other players must show any card in their hand that matches your guess. This is when you start taking notes to slowly rule out who didn't do it to eventually figure out who did. And over the years, Parker Brothers and Hasbro would go on to branch out the Clue franchise with so many video games, starting with this version for the Super Nintendo, all the way up to this version that was recently released for the Nintendo Switch. And of course, it only makes sense that while expanding the board game to other forms of media, why not go even further with game shows, an okay 5-part TV kids show, and a movie. Murder mystery films have always done well, especially if the plot is delivered in a way that leaves a tantalizing trail of breadcrumbs for the audience to follow, with lots of unexpected twists and turns along the way. From the earliest Sherlock Holmes films starring Basil Rathbone as the iconic detective, all the way up to the recent Agatha Christie movie adaptations with Kenneth Branagh as director and star detective Hercule Poirot, with his ridiculous accent, you can always sign me up for a murder mystery. But there's also something lighthearted about Clue the board game. More often than not, depending on how competitive you and your friends are, board games are usually filled with fun and laughter, and disagreements about the rules. So I'm glad that when we did get a feature-length movie simply called Clue, the production team behind it decided to make it a comedy first and foremost, and a creepy mystery second. A slightly darker comedy since it is about murder and blackmail, but a comedy nonetheless. Clue the movie was released in 1985 and was a bit of a financial failure. It grossed $14 million at the box office against a budget of $15 million. It has since become a cult classic, and it's not hard to see why. There are an impressive amount of funny people involved with this film, both behind the camera and in front of it. While this was director Jonathan Lynn's first comedy, he would go on to helm My Cousin Vinny with Joe Pesci, and The Whole Nine Yards with Bruce Willis and Matthew Perry. And Clue's script was co-written by none other than comedy aficionado John Landis, who famously wrote and directed The Blues Brothers, starring Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi, along with An American Werewolf in London, one of the first films to expertly balance both comedy and horror. But to be honest, the main person I personally attribute much of Clue's success to is without a doubt the legendary Tim Curry. Throughout the late 60s and early 70s, Tim Curry was mostly known as a dramatic stage actor, until he landed the lead role in the cult musical The Rocky Horror Show, famously adapted for the screen in 1975 as The Rocky Horror Picture Show. Curry would go on to have a successful career as a singer-songwriter and actor, both on stage and on film. And in 1985, he would appear in two very different films. First as The Darkness, aka the freaking devil, in Ridley Scott's Legend, opposite a very young Tom Cruise, and second as the butler Wadsworth in Clue. While Curry is surrounded by other comedy legends including Madeline Kahn, Michael McKean, and Christopher Lloyd, it's Curry's manic energy that ties everything together. And it's wild to think that Tim Curry almost never got the role. Originally, the production team wanted Leonard Rossiter, best known overseas for his role in the British sitcom Rising Damp, but others may recognize him as one of the doctors from 2001: A Space Odyssey. But unfortunately, Rossiter passed away before filming. The team's second choice for the role was Rowan Atkinson, who was making waves at the time in another British sitcom called Blackadder, but wouldn't find international recognition until his role as Mr. Bean. So ultimately, it went to Curry. Interestingly, Carrie Fisher was originally cast as Miss Scarlet, but had to withdraw due to personal struggles. Of course, now I'm trying to picture a version of Clue starring Princess Leia and Mr. Bean, aka Mr. Steal-Ya Girl.
No one else in the history of all time has ever been left for Mr. Bean. What a surreal and lonely feeling that is.
For the ones out there who haven't seen it, Clue follows 6 strangers who are invited to a dinner party at a private mansion. Wadsworth the butler welcomes everyone and reminds them to use their pseudonyms to ensure their true names are kept secret. Soon, the guests learn that they're all connected in that they all make their living thanks to the government, before it's revealed that they're all being blackmailed by a 7th guest, the mysterious Mr. Body. Get it? I just wanted to make sure, because this pun is super subtle. Surprising absolutely no one, Mr. Body is shot, and Wadsworth informs the group he's called the police. Before you know it, fingers are pointed, chaos ensues, and the hunt for the murderer is on. While the setup is pretty straightforward for a typical murder mystery scenario, it's the mood this movie creates and the offbeat characters at the center of it that makes Clue so enjoyable from beginning to end. It's made clear quite quickly that everyone is presumably hiding something, but each character's quirky personality traits make them simultaneously endearing and entertaining, even when it's revealed that pretty much all of them have the motive to kill. So while more potential victims show up at the mansion, and the subsequent body count begins to rise, everyone must work together to solve the mystery and get out alive. Like many cult movies, Clue is endlessly quotable. There's so many strange and hilarious moments that I continue to reference to this day.
Wadsworth, am I right in thinking there is nobody else in this house?
No.
Then there is someone else in this house.
No, sorry. I said no meaning yes.
No meaning yes?
I hated her
so much. Flames on the side of my face.
You see, like the Manties, we always get our man.
Mrs. Peacock was a man? Okay, Chief, take him away. I'm gonna go home and sleep with my wife.
Easily, one of the best things about this movie is the way it pays tribute to the board game in a way that makes it stand out when compared to any other murder mystery story. In fact, now that I think about it, the only movie to do something even remotely similar is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Hey, wipe that confused look off your face. Follow me for a second. When Clue originally hit theaters, it played to audiences with 3 different versions, each with its own ending. Due to the different characters, weapons, and rooms, the board game actually has an astounding 324 possible outcomes. Well, the movie gave us 3. 2 where one person was responsible, and 1 where pretty much everyone did it, except Mr. Green. And when Clue released on home video, all 3 endings were shown in a row, with a title card and catchy little jingle separating each variation. And that's how most people know the movie now. This release strategy is similar to Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, because while that one was in theaters back in 2023, fans began to notice slight differences in certain scenes, and it was eventually revealed that there were 2 cuts of the film floating around out there, seemingly playing into the whole multiverse thing. In 2017, Clue the movie was adapted to a completely different medium with Clue on stage, and it seems to work just as well with a live audience without the genius of Tim Curry. Well, pretty much. Thanks to the fantastic script, the hilarious dialogue from the movie makes a pretty seamless transition to the stage. From the few trailers I've seen, the stage version also lovingly borrows iconic music and sound effects from the film, creating a live version that acts as a loving tribute to the original film. Back in 2011, Universal Studios announced the inevitable remake of Clue, because, for whatever reason, we must remake everything we enjoyed from the 80s. A few years later, it was reported that 20th Century Fox picked up the film's rights, with eyes on creating a Clue film franchise with Ryan Reynolds to star. Then, he was replaced by Jason Bateman, but that version also failed to get off the ground. And as of February 2024, Hasbro is still hoping to make this film happen. You know, it's interesting. I first watched Clue on the Family Channel. That's a Canadian television channel that I always thought was similar to the Disney Channel, since that's where a lot of us Canucks watched Disney TV shows and movies. I usually tuned into that channel because it was one of the few we had growing up that ran without commercials. So if a movie was playing one evening, I was more likely to give it a chance, since I didn't have to be constantly interrupted by annoying advertisements. And when Clue played one night, I was blown away with how strange, sort of creepy, but mostly hilarious it was. To be fair, Clue is a somewhat adult-themed movie since, it's about murder and blackmail, but with a few choice edits, it works surprisingly well as an all-ages movie. For a long time, I felt like Clue was majorly overlooked. But these days, it feels like more and more people are finding out about this 80s gem. And that's awesome, because this movie deserves even more love. And while I don't normally love the idea of remakes, I do think Clue could use one. Not because I think there's anything wrong with the first one, but that concept of a black comedy murder mystery with an eclectic cast of characters with multiple endings could totally create some movie magic for a brand new audience. I just hope if it does happen, it's still funny enough to make me laugh long and loud and clear. What do you think? Have you ever watched Clue or played the board game? What are some other cult classic movies you think deserve more recognition? Give me all the details down in the comments below, and until next time, Ouija, I understand. It's probably the only board game that you could launch a successful horror franchise off of. And the prequel, Origin of Evil, from director Mike Flanagan, that was pretty good. But Battleship? Why Battleship? I'm telling you, Monopoly is a guaranteed success. Hey, hope you're having a super awesome day. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much, and I'll see you real soon.